I wish to acknowledge the Larrakia people, and I bring greetings from Cape York Peninsula. I want to acknowledge the Indigenous people of the Northern Territory. I'm so very pleased to be here tonight. I share a vision with you for the future of our people, and I just have this very deep conviction that education must be at the centre of that vision. Minister Lambley, Natasha Griggs, Ken Davies, my colleague Richard Smith, Kurt Engelman. I'm very privileged to have your presence here, and all the teachers and administrators and principals and teacher aides that are commencing with us on this enterprise. I'm really, again, very pleased to be here with you. It was when Minister Chandler from the Northern Territory came over to Cape York and visited our schools. I believe he is the most committed education minister that I've come across anywhere in the country. Over more than 3 decades of working with all kinds of ministers of all kinds of political persuasions, Peter Chandler was convinced by what he saw. And Minister Lambley, I want to really ask you to convey to him my huge admiration and appreciation for his role in bringing all of this about. We had Minister Chandler over in the Cape visiting our schools a couple of times with Ken, and on that first occasion I recall that I was a bit anxious that we might have had a fish on the line and we were about to lose it, and I was being shuttled off to the airport by a colleague to catch a plane, and my other colleagues at the office were still presenting to the Northern Territory delegation, and I got Ken on the phone, and I was digging around for my best arguments, and I said, mate, the planets don't line up better than this, and you know, you've got Minister Pyne and the federal government completely on board with us. You've got a government in the territory. You have a minister who is clearly convicted about explicit and direct instruction. And you have me. I am like Halley's Comet. I only come around once in a... you know how the story would have gone. I don't know that that was convincing for Ken, but that's where the metaphor should end, because Halley's Comet zooms out into the outer space after a while. I'm really been waiting for this day for a long, long time. I regret that my zeal for school reform I suppressed for a long time. And I regret that I didn't start acting on my convictions earlier in life, because with every year that we've tarried, you know, another generation is lost. So I want to share with you my thoughts about the importance of direct instruction. Firstly, what I want to impress upon everyone is that direct instruction is a proven program. There's nothing we're going to do with this project, and there's nothing that we've done in Cape York Peninsula that will kind of show evidence of the effectiveness of direct instruction more than that there already is. There is a large evidence base for direct instruction. The only thing that will happen in relation to the Flexible Literacy Project is it will demonstrate whether we have been effective in its implementation. Direct instruction itself is a fully proven program. John Hattie's analysis in visible learning tells us that the worldwide evidence for direct instruction is that it is a proven and effective program. It's an important thing when we have discussions about direct instruction in Australia to get everyone to realise that we're dealing with a program that has an enormous evidence base. And whatever results we accumulate here in Australia just represents a very small proportion of that international evidence. So the challenge for us is, how do we take a proven program and implement it with full effectiveness? And that's our challenge, and we've commenced upon that challenge this week with the training of the principals and the training of our teachers and the plans that we're making for implementation in 2015 and in the subsequent years. Direct instruction is a proven program. All that is left to prove is whether we are competent in implementation. The other point I wanted to make about direct instruction is that very early on in our thinking about school reform, we alighted on our insight that is captured in our logo for Good to Great Schools. There's a lot of talk about teacher quality. And it seemed to me that in the discussions about teacher quality in Australia and internationally, that there was a kind of missing element to that discussion. And so our logo seems to capture this archway of school reform. And on the left-hand side, we believe the teacher is at the apex of that side of the archway, and the student is on the other side. But between them sits this keystone of effective instruction. And in all of the policy discussion I continue to read about teacher quality, there is missing this notion of what lies between the teacher and the student. What is there between the teacher? What is the nature of that relationship? What is the key to that relationship? Of course, it's pastoral concern and friendship and, yea, love. But you can have all of those things. You can have the most tender regard on the part of the teacher for the child. But if you don't have effective instruction, you don't have anything. You have a beautiful relationship, but you don't have learning. That is why we believe the keystone to school reform is effective instruction. If there is not effective instruction between the teacher and the student, then we can have all sorts of glorious and heartwarming things going on, but we don't have learning and we don't have success. That is why, with Good to Great Schools, our logo really captures what we believe to be the essence of success. Great teachers delivering effective instruction to every child. We started our relationship with the National Institute for Direct Instruction when we went over there in 2009 and met Kurt's father, Siegfried, and the team at NIFTY in Portland and in Eugene, and we saw schools in various parts of the United States. And the Indigenous leaders that went with me saw these DI schools and were convinced that they wanted the program in Orookun and Cohen. And then we started the relationship between NIFTY and Cape York, We've implemented a comprehensive DI program, literacy, numeracy, the whole works. And can I tell you my own kind of interpretation of what effective instruction, how effective instruction has played out in our schools? I believe that failing schools, as we found them in 2009, can be turned around. And they can be turned around in short order. Once you start implementing effective instruction, you feel the ship turn. And poor schools that are heading south have got to make a U-turn. That's what it means to turn a school around. If the boat is heading south, it's got to go north. And there has got to be a distinct turn in the ship. And in early 2010, there was a lot of conflagration in the early stages. Teachers were bewildered. We only had 30 days from the time Education Queensland authorised us to start to the start of the school year. Teachers were bewildered, principals were upset, children were facing a stress and work level that they'd never experienced before. Parents were concerned. We had a cyclone raging in that first term in 2010. We were concerned we were going to lose the union. I really thought that our project was going to come crashing down in that first term. But you know, there's a logic to effective instruction. It's a logic that eventually starts to play out in the school. And by Easter, it was as if the cyclone had subsided and the classrooms were starting to hum and the children were learning and the teachers were feeling that the children were learning, and the virtuous process of learning success and teaching success was now apparent. And that's the beauty of direct instruction as explained by Kurt. Direct instruction is a program that in the next lesson the child is able to experience success. The next lesson is when the child experiences success. Not, maybe a few weeks down the track or at the end of the term. The next lesson is pitched at a level where the child is able to experience success. And you know, when the child experiences learning success, the teacher experiences teaching success. And you start to get a virtuous engine starting to turn. That virtuous engine of teaching success, learning success, teaching success, learning success. And with DI providing the sequence for the child who has succeeded to go on to learn and succeed with the next lesson, it's all laid out. You start to get an engine humming, a virtuous engine of learning. And if you're able to get the classroom humming like that, then the principal's job and the coach's job and the implementation support people from NIFTY, they then help you get the humming happening in every classroom. And at some stage, during the course of that first year, there will be moments when you hear the school hum. Because every classroom is involved in the business of learning success and teaching success. We've adopted the framework in our schools laid out by McKinsey and Company, that we think school reform is a process of going from poor to fair, and poor to fair involves turning the ship around, doing the U-turn. And I believe the U-turn happens in that first term. If you're doing everything properly, you will feel the ship turn around in the first term. You'll have a distinct sense in that first year, early in that first year, that your ship has turned around. The next stage in the McKinsey framework is going from fair to good. And in Cape York Peninsula, we think we're still on that journey. We think our 3 schools are fair. If you go to Oracle and Cohen or Hopevale, you're going to a fair school. But they're not good schools yet. We think we have to hit a higher stage of performance before we can say that we're good. Sometimes I think we're knocking on the door of good, but Lynn McKenzie and the leadership team at our schools, we've set some metrics around this, and we believe that we can only fairly say that we run fair schools, but we're desperately wanting to get to good. We can't get to good unless we solve attendance fundamentally. We're just not going to get the bounce out of the numbers that we need to call ourselves good if we don't solve attendance. And of course, when we do get to good, and I hope in the next 2 years we'll be able to say in Cape York that these are not just fair schools, these are good schools. When we get to that stage, our next aspiration will be say, right, we're going to get to great. These good schools are going to become great. And a whole lot of other challenges will face us when we think about going to great. But now I can say to all parents, whether they be the Indigenous community members of those communities, staff who come to work in those communities, plumbers, electricians, administrators, I can say to them, you send your kid to that school, they will get a fair education. These are fair schools. And if you send your kid every day, they will do really well. So the keystone of our thinking is effective instruction, and direct instruction is the most effective way of teaching the children that we're concerned with. I always use the metaphor that there are some kids who are going to learn to read no matter what, but exposing them to direct instruction is like giving drill practice to the champion footballer. You might think that they don't need it, but it never hurts them and actually sharpens them. The champion footballer who's done the drill becomes a bigger champion. So direct instruction is a program that works very well for high-achieving middle-class students as much as it does for the most disadvantaged kids. Finally, I want to say that we have a moral purpose here. Kurt's father, Siegfried, dedicated his life in developing direct instruction not primarily to help middle-class kids. He could have done that, and that could have been one trajectory for his educational work. Instead, his first priority was to provide an education for children from the ghettos, to give an education to those kids who had flimsy chances and opportunities in life. And It is a program that works for kids from the ghettos. And it's completely essential, particularly for those kids that come from homes where there's no books, where there's low levels of literacy and English speaking, all kinds of disadvantages suffered by children. Direct instruction becomes even more essential for children from our backgrounds. And our moral purpose here is to equip the children from remote communities, from Aboriginal Australia, to seize a future for our people. I believe that the big challenge for our remote communities is that we want to see our people live long lives, and we want our people to live long on the earth. I have no less an aspiration than that the Wik people be here in 1,000 years' time. I want the Guguyamagar people to be here in 500 years' time. I want the Guguyalanji people to be a people in hundreds of years' time. We were a people for 40,000 years. How is it that we should have a precarious future after only 200 years of European presence in this country? We are in a precarious situation, and if we don't get on top of our education, 53,000 years of possession of this continent will be lost to us in the decades to come. This is how fundamental education is. It is about the survival of our people and our culture and our languages. So we have a great moral purpose with this program, to equip our kids with the capability to succeed in two worlds, to retain their culture and their identity and their connection with their country, but to also participate at the front line of advantage in Australia. And they can't have the best of both worlds unless we give them a good education. I refuse to give up on remote Aboriginal communities because my own home is a remote Aboriginal community. I want my children and grandchildren and their children to prosper in the future. And so the great moral purpose we have as educators, and more so you, as the people that we entrust to teach our children, our great moral purpose goes beyond the simple teaching of literacy, but is about the survival of our people. Let me say in closing that I'm a great admirer of teachers. I don't think there's any more noble profession than teaching. It is the most sacred business. And I admire everyone who choose as a career the nurturing of our children and equipping them for their futures. You are involved in a very noble profession. I hope that our organisation will honour and support you in that profession. We believe that in the discussions of teacher quality, there's been insufficient attention to teaching quality. We believe that every teacher can do excellent teaching. And our friends from the United States have got a whole lot of accumulated practices and insights and programs that will enable all teachers of all sorts of aptitude to nevertheless do good teaching. I urge Natasha Griggs and Minister Lambley to communicate to your colleagues our immense appreciation for the support of the federal government. Minister Pyne is very well acquainted with the arguments in relation to direct and explicit instruction. It is a fortuitous time for us, and I just want to say in closing that I want to wish everyone all the best. I hope that over the months to come that I will get around to visiting your schools and the communities. I want to talk to the elders, and I want to talk to the community leaders. I want to talk to the parents. That we've got to have a vision for our people, for our future. We've got to have a vision as Aboriginal people for the future of our children. And if we get behind them, there is absolutely no reason why our children could not have the best of both worlds here in Australia, this their own country. So over the coming period, my particular commitment is to work with all of you Aboriginal people, leaders in the education field, teachers, teacher aides, parents, elders, community leaders. Let's have a talk and let's make some plans, and let's support one another in pursuing this vision for our children's future. Thank you very much.